So the seed for Anthem began really with this journey to create a church for people who don't like church. We had started a church, my wife and I and several other couples in Alachua, Florida, called Christ Central Ministries, and it's still there today. And after several years of attempting that, we felt like we weren't quite getting there. There was a compelling need to see a church like that happen. We weren't quite sure how to get it to happen. So in the fall of '07, I got a phone call from Donald Wise, who worked with North Point Ministries.
I first heard about Anthem before as Anthem when Chad and a group were still at Christ Central Church in Alachua. And so I started a conversation with Chad and a group of the leaders there that they wanted to start a church in Alachua. We all kind of scratched our head a little bit and looked around like, I'm not sure Alachua is where we need to be, but we would gladly talk to you if you'd like to go to Gainesville.
So about a week after my conversation with Donald Wise, I found myself sitting in the waiting room, if you will, the reception area of the North Point Ministries offices in Alpharetta, Georgia. And I had never met any of these people. I just talked to Donald Wise on the phone, but didn't know who he was. I wouldn't recognize any of them if they walked in the room. And I'm sitting there kind of like wondering, what is happening? Like, how did I get here?
I remember meeting Chad. He came to Atlanta, and we met in my office. And actually, it may have been him and another guy. I think, as I recall, there were several people in the room. And I remember distinctly Chad taking all kinds of notes.
And they already had a building and a place to meet. And now we're thinking about, hey, how about moving 25, 30 miles or so down the road, transplant your families to start a church down there in an area you don't have any place to even meet in yet.
Quite frankly, at that point, in that moment, I had no idea what would be next, and wasn't sure if an idea like Anthem would even exist, if we could in fact even do this for our community and for our region. And
really, I thought we'd probably scare them off the first time. I thought that would be the thing, that they'd say, no, this is our home, we're going to stay here.
And he just challenged me at that moment to go back and to begin casting vision and trying to get support for that idea around moving to Gainesville.
A pretty good bit of time went by before we heard back from him again.
But at the same moment that this was happening, and there was another group of people that had contacted me, and they actually were from the Tower Church on Tower Road, Tower Baptist Church. And they had contacted me in regards to becoming a pastor.
My name is Don. God brought me here in January of 1985 as a church planner to begin the work that is now known as Anthem Church. The reason I came here was I had a friend named Kai Bowman that was my best friend in seminary at Southwestern Baptist, and we would meet together and pray about what God wanted us to do after seminary. And our one prayer was, we want God to send us where there's 10,000 people that need to hear the gospel. And it was from that prayer that God brought me to Gainesville.
The Tower Group actually called me back, and I think it was the pastor search committee that actually called me back again and said, Pastor Clemons, we know that you said to take your name off the list, and we've done that. We've removed your name from this idea of you being the pastor here, but we had heard that you were thinking about partnering with North Point to bring a strategic partner to Gainesville, and we would love to discuss that idea with you. None of us had ever really seen churches coming together, and so this was like Christ Central in Alachua, Tower Church in Gainesville, and North Point Ministries in Atlanta. It was like three churches kind of coming into one idea to bring a church like Anthem into reality. And it was, I'm telling you, it was some of the most amazing conversations, and really unnerving in some ways, because you knew the only way this is going to happen well is if God was in the middle of it. So as launch was becoming more and more a reality, and we were about ready to begin opening up Anthem and actually have church in Gainesville, it became really clear that we needed to have leaders that could help us create a church for people that don't like church. And that's when I was introduced to a man named Derek Ostovic. We met in Atlanta as he was coming to North Point, and I was already there doing an internship. And it was at that meeting it became really clear that we should probably partner together, journey together. It was more clear to me than it was to Derek, as he was looking for, just where God wanted him and what God wanted him to do and where God wanted him to land. But I just really felt like he was the right fit for the vision that we had. And so I asked him and his family, I asked them to come sight unseen, which is kind of crazy, but I asked them just to come to Gainesville, Florida and be a part of this incredible team of people.
So I arrived in Gainesville, Florida on August 1st, 2008 and joined the team that was already here, and there was a ton of work to do still before we were ready to begin our previous services, and we went straight to it. At least I did. They were already doing it, but I joined them, and we just worked so hard.
So in those early days, we didn't have a massive group of people, but we had a massively committed group of people. People like my wife, who had been along my side this entire journey and continues to be. People like Jim Moore, who jumped in and said, hey, look, I have some time to help build something, and I want to be a part of it.
We came many afternoons after work, along with several other people. We tore down walls, pulled up carpet and tile, put up walls, painted, repainted, painted some more.
Launching Anthem felt a little bit like throwing a party. Like we had this grand vision for a giant party, and we decided it was going to be at 7, and we all got there early and we set the place up and we all cooked food, and then it was 6:58 and nobody was there yet, and we looked at each other and said, did we send the invitations? Did we say 7? We said 7, didn't we? And sort of having this anticipation and being ready, and then wondering if anyone was going to show up.
And then about a month into launching was when the economy tanked. The funding that we were hoping for, that we were planning on, disappeared.
Our difficult position in the Strategic Partner Program is almost like a parent with a child. It's like, how much money do you give them? And you give them some, but if you give them too much, you spoil them, and they need to develop their own giving base. And it was really difficult to try to figure out where that balance was, and we erred too much and too little in our Strategic Partner Program. So Chad, unfortunately, and Anthem early on didn't benefit from the fact that we hadn't figured it out. It was tough on them, and we had to say a few times, hey, we can't fund you like we know we need to.
Which, to be honest, was a really scary conversation, because for us, the train had already left the station. We had already said, hey, we're in on this, and we had so many people that were sacrificing so much to make Anthem a reality. Within literally 30 days of that conversation, I had to let go. I had to actually fire 3 people that were part of our staff. We had launched with a staff of 5 full-time employees, and it became very obvious very quickly that there was no way we were going to be able to sustain that.
This was the first time that we had endeavored to plant a church of this type, and while we knew deep down that it could succeed, there were times where I wondered, are we really the people that can help make it happen?
I can remember having conversations with God and saying, why did you do this? Why did you let us taste part of this dream but then not allow it to happen? It almost felt like we were being teased with the idea of creating a church like this, but then we weren't going to actually get to see it happen.
Even when sometimes I wasn't fully convinced, I reminded him that God called him and our family, to this vision, and that if it really was what God wanted, that he would make it happen.
We just knew instinctively as leaders, if we're going to make this work, we're going to have to cut. So we did. And operationally, we cut our budget by 60%. That meant that for Derek and I, the only 2 guys left on staff, that we were going to take a 40% reduction in salary.
It shattered us. I can remember many times just she and me just crying, just sitting together on the floor crying, because it was just so hard, especially for her. And it was difficult for me as a husband and as a father to see that happen and to feel so out of control, and all I could do was pray to God, Lord, help us. You've got to show up.
But at the same time we were doing the things we could do, some things just happened that we had no control over.
And we were going somewhere. We walked out to the mailbox and opened it up and pulled out a check, or a letter, and there was a check in there, a large check in there from California. And we were like, who do we know in California? And it was almost exactly what we needed to get by for that week. And that was just one example of just many ways that God just showed up.
And there were even times where Chad and Derek said, okay, at some point, if this continues or if X happens, we're not going to sacrifice our families.
I didn't want to be the one to say, I just can't do this anymore. I don't think any of us wanted to. We were all invested and had so much, you know, heart and soul in it already that I don't think any of us wanted to say, we got to put a date on it and that might be the end.
In the middle of that struggle, I remember a dinner conversation. Chad and Kathy came over to our house and we had dinner together. We did that often, but this time we were doing it because we just needed to have a heart-to-heart.
We met with them, quite frankly, just to talk about where do we draw the line in the sand? Where do we say, okay, enough is enough? And when do we say we won't sacrifice our families any longer for this idea?
I remember that there was a really heavy feeling that night. Chad and Kathy and Sierra came over for dinner and we put our boys to bed, and then the 5 of us sat in my living room and sort of looked at each other and had to have a tough conversation.
If things don't turn by this time, and then we're gonna be done. We'll take that as a sign from God that we've done whatever He wanted us to do and it was over, and we should move on to whatever's next. But the cool thing about that was within a month, just maybe even weeks after having that conversation, the tides turned and we had our first cash flow positive week as a church. And from that moment on, it's like we turned a corner.
Early on in the spring of 2009, we had people that came to Anthem that were not a part of helping us launch Anthem. And we look back and we kind of call those people the first wave of influencers. And one of those key influencers in those early days was Christy Grotto.
When I was church hopping around Gainesville, there were places where I felt like, I don't know what to wear, and I don't know if I could invite my friends here. And coming to Anthem was so perfect because I knew this is a place where I can invite people.
So the reality of this vision to create a church like this started happening. And this vision became very real when we started reaching people in our community and hearing of life change and hearing stories of people being impacted. People like Maggie, people like not just Christy Grotto, but benwade and Ken Leonard and the Barroncotts. And we started reaching families that had moved to Gainesville, relocated for work, or coming up for school.
My life has completely changed since being at Anthem. I mean, accepting Christ and being baptized here has changed the way I live my life on a daily basis. I no longer try to live my life for me. I try to live my life for God and for the people around me.
Because of Anthem, I know what I'm supposed to do. And I know where God wants me and needs me to serve. And that wouldn't have happened without Anthem.
Actually, when I first came to Anthem, I didn't like it. I'm a really opinionated person, and I'm the kind of person that will find kind of a problem with anything, so I sort of let that side of me take a back seat. It wasn't until much later when I began actually serving in student ministries that I really got kind of captured with Anthem's mission and vision.
What made Gainesville home for us was Anthem. It's now our family, and I think that's really what made it complete for us, was finding Anthem.
I'm excited that our kids have a church that they're looking forward to attending. In fact, they probably don't even know it's church. It's too fun.
What's so great about Anthem is that even though we came here initially for ourselves, is that our children and our grandchildren really love it here and are growing spiritually.
Finally found a church that we wake up on Sunday and we want to go, that we feel like when we don't go, we're missing out. And I've never experienced that before in my entire life until now. And that's why we go to Anthem.
And there's no reason for us not to believe that God will continue to do the impossible as Anthem stretches into the next 5 to 10, 20 years in our city. It's an exciting time to be a part of Anthem because we know that in order for that to happen, it's going to take all of us It's going to take all of us agreeing that this is our anthem, that this is where we belong. This is something that we're a part of, and each of us having kind of a passion to create a church for people that don't like church.
This is our anthem.
Our anthem is to trust God to bring His vision to reality.
This is our anthem.
Our anthem is a place where 3 generations of our family can be involved in a growing relationship with Christ.
This is our anthem.
Our anthem is a place where burnt-out people find a new start.
This is our anthem.
Our anthem is a place to discover your passion and purpose.
This is our anthem.
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 Our anthem is to be a church for people who don't like church.